Welcome to Her Secret Truth, a place where the truth always comes out. Here you'll hear stories of family betrayals, hidden secrets, and shocking revelations. Every story is a step closer to the truth someone tried to hide. Subscribe to Her Secret Truth so you don't miss new stories you won't be able to stop watching. Rachel's voice sliced straight through the Christmas morning laughter. You're a useless old woman. I pushed back my chair, stood up, and met her stare. Then stop calling me when you need money, I said. What happened next forced me to dial 911 within minutes. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. This story escalates quickly, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But first, let me explain how Christmas morning became the day everything changed. My name is Kathleen Turner, though everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 67 years old, and I truly believed I'd already experienced every kind of family drama imaginable. I was wrong. The morning began beautifully. My son Michael had invited me to spend Christmas with his family, something that had become less and less common over the years. His wife Rachel usually found ways to keep these gatherings small, but this year, she'd been unusually eager to include me. I should have recognized that as a warning sign. I arrived at their well-kept suburban home in Denver right at 10, exactly as requested, carrying my famous apple crisp and a bag of carefully chosen gifts for my grandchildren, Lucas, 16, and Natalie, 14. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, with soft Christmas music playing in the background. Grandma Maggie! Natalie ran toward me, her face glowing with excitement. Lucas tried to maintain his teenage indifference, but still smiled and helped carry my bags inside. Rachel greeted me with what I now realize was a carefully rehearsed smile. Kathleen, so glad you could come. The kids have been asking about you all morning. Michael hugged me warmly, and for the first few hours, everything felt normal. We opened presents. The kids showed me their new games and clothes. I even helped Rachel in the kitchen while she prepared the traditional Christmas meal. That's where things began to fall apart. Kathleen, Rachel said as she pulled the turkey from the oven, could you grab the desserts from the counter? I want to make sure dinner's ready. I looked over. Pumpkin pie, chocolate cake, a store-bought apple tart, no apple crisp. Where did you put my crisp? I asked, checking the other counters. Oh, that, she said lightly. I put it in the pantry. We already have plenty of food, and honestly, Michael mentioned that store-bought desserts are just easier when it comes to cleanup. The dismissal stung, but I kept my voice steady. I've been making that recipe for 30 years. It's Lucas's favorite. Well, people's tastes change, Rachel replied with a shrug, turning back to the turkey. I should have let it go. I should have swallowed the insult and moved on. But something about her tone, the way she brushed aside decades of tradition, pushed me to speak up. Rachel, I spent 3 hours yesterday making that crisp. The least you could do is serve it. That's when her mask dropped completely. 3 hours. Her voice shot up. 3 hours on a dessert nobody even asked for? This is exactly what I mean, Kathleen. She continued, sharper now. You just assume you're welcome to contribute. Assume we want your input. Assume we even need you here. The kitchen went quiet except for the low bubbling on the stove. From the living room, I could still hear Michael and the kids laughing, unaware of the confrontation unfolding just feet away. I brought dessert because that's what family does, I said quietly. I've been bringing dessert to family dinners longer than you've been part of this family. Rachel's eyes flashed. And what is that supposed to mean? Because let me tell you something about family. She stepped closer. Family doesn't show up unannounced and reorganize the refrigerator. Family doesn't criticize how we raise our children. And family doesn't expect to be catered to just because they're old. Each word landed like a slap. I've never done any of those things, I said. Haven't you? She leaned in, lowering her voice to a sharp whisper. The fridge last month when you helped put groceries away. The comment 2 weeks ago about Lucas needing more structure. Should I keep going? I stared at her, realizing that every small gesture, every well-intended suggestion had been quietly recorded and saved for this moment. I was trying to help. You were trying to control, she snapped. Just like you always have. Just like you did with Michael. And just like you're doing now with my children. The constant advice. The little gifts that come with strings attached. The way you act like you always know better. That last accusation cut the deepest, Because it simply wasn't true. Every gift I'd ever given came straight from the heart, with no expectations attached beyond seeing my family smile. What strings, Rachel? I asked. When have I ever? The money, Kathleen. Her voice cut cleanly through my sentence. Let's talk about the money you give Michael. The little loans you never expect back. The cash you slip him when you think I'm not paying attention. I stared at her, stunned. You really think that doesn't come with strings? She continued. You don't think we feel obligated? Obligated to include you, to tolerate your interference. All because of your generosity. It felt like a punch to the stomach. I give Michael money because I love him, I said. Because I want to help. You give Michael money because it makes you feel needed, she shot back. Because it gives you influence over our choices, over our lives. And when we don't respond the way you want, you pull out the guilt. All the sacrifices you've made for this family. That's not true, I said weakly. Isn't it? Rachel didn't hesitate. How many times have you reminded us you paid for Lucas's braces? Natalie's summer camp? That mortgage payment when Michael was between jobs last year? You keep a mental ledger, don't you? I opened my mouth to deny it, and couldn't. Because while my intentions had never been manipulative, I couldn't honestly say I'd never felt hurt when my help went unacknowledged. When it seemed invisible. Rachel saw the hesitation immediately. And there it is, she said. You do keep track. And you do use it. Dinner afterward felt surreal. By the time we returned to the dining room, Rachel had reassembled herself completely. Smiling, graceful, the perfect hostess once again. But every glance we exchanged carried tension so sharp it made my chest ache. Michael talked about work, oblivious. The kids chattered about school and their new Christmas gifts, full of energy and excitement. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing, wondering how long this resentment had been quietly growing. Grandma, aren't you going to have any apple crisp? Natalie asked when Rachel brought out the dessert tray. Before I could respond, Rachel spoke smoothly. Oh, Grandma didn't bring apple crisp this year, sweetheart. But look, chocolate cake. Your favorite. The lie slid out so naturally that for a split second, even I questioned myself. But Lucas didn't. I saw it in the pantry when I grabbed napkins, he said. The dish with the crumbly top. The one Grandma always makes. Rachel's smile tightened just slightly. That was just leftovers from earlier in the week, she said lightly. Nothing special. Can we have some anyway? Lucas asked, already shifting in his chair. Sit down, Lucas. Rachel's voice sharpened instantly. I said we're having the desserts on the table. The room went quiet. Michael finally cleared his throat. Everything okay, honey? Rachel laughed, bright, brittle. Of course. Just trying to stay organized. You know how chaotic Christmas can be. But Lucas wasn't finished. With the stubborn clarity of a 16-year-old who knows something isn't right, he looked straight at me. Grandma, did you make your apple crisp this year? The one with oats on top. I met his eyes, then glanced at Rachel. Her face was neutral, controlled, but the warning was unmistakable. This was my moment to choose. I could protect her version of the story, or I could tell the truth. Yes, Lucas, I said softly. I made it yesterday. Then why can't we? Because, Rachel cut in, her voice rising despite her effort to rein it in. Sometimes adults make decisions about what's appropriate for special occasions. She turned toward me. And sometimes people need to accept that not every tradition has to be preserved just because it's old. Michael missed the implication entirely. I didn't. The apple crisp wasn't what she was talking about anymore. I understand, I said quietly. Good, Rachel replied, slicing herself a generous piece of chocolate cake. I'm glad we're clear. But we didn't understand each other at all. What was becoming painfully clear to me was that Rachel hadn't just been annoyed or frustrated in the moment. She had been slowly, deliberately removing me from this family's traditions. And the apple crisp wasn't the problem, it was just the most recent casualty. Once the thought took hold, everything else fell into place. I thought back over the past year. How many family gatherings had I been excluded from with vague explanations about keeping things small? How often had Michael mentioned birthdays, dinners, or school events only after they'd already happened, apologizing for forgetting to invite me? How many times had I been told the kids were too busy with school and activities to visit, while their social media showed them happily spending time with other relatives. The realization settled heavily in my chest. This wasn't about dessert. It wasn't even about Christmas. It was about Rachel's quiet, consistent effort to shrink my role in their lives while still preserving access to my financial help whenever it suited her. After dinner, I offered to help clean up, hoping it might give me a chance to speak privately with Michael. But Rachel had clearly planned the evening down to the minute. Michael was dispatched to the garage with Lucas to work on something. Natalie was sent upstairs to organize her new clothes. And I was left alone in the kitchen with Rachel. Exactly as she intended. "I suppose you're proud of yourself," she said flatly, scraping plates with unnecessary force. "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied. "The little performance at the table," she continued. "Making me look bad in front of the children. Very mature, Kathleen." I set the serving dish down slowly. "Rachel, I need to understand what's going on. I feel like I'm missing something important." She turned toward me, all pretense gone. "What you're missing," she said sharply, "is that this is my family, my home, my children, and I'm tired of pretending that your constant presence and commentary are welcome." "Michael is my son," I said. "Michael is my husband," she shot back. "Those children are mine. This house is mine. And I decide who gets included in our family life. And who doesn't." The possessiveness in her voice was startling. As if Michael and the kids were possessions instead of people with their own bonds and histories. "You can't just erase me because you feel threatened," I said. Rachel laughed. A short, humorless sound. "Threatened by you," she said. "Look at you, Kathleen. You're 67, living alone in a small apartment. The only reason anyone still pays attention to you is because you write checks. Do you honestly think that intimidates me?" Each word was chosen carefully. Each one landed exactly where she meant it to, but something inside me pushed back. "If that's truly how you see me," I asked quietly, "then why do you keep taking my money?" For the first time she hesitated. "That's different." "How?" She turned back to the sink, her shoulders stiff. "You said it yourself. Family helps family. Michael's job is demanding. The mortgage is high. The kids have expenses. When you offer help, we accept because we need to." She paused, then added coldly, "That doesn't mean we enjoy feeling like you're hovering over every decision we make." The truth hurt, but at least it was honest. For years, I told myself my financial help was appreciated, that it was an expression of love, received with gratitude. Now I understood. My money was tolerated. My presence was the inconvenience that came with it. "So what do you want from me?" I asked. "Do you want the checks to keep coming but without me showing up? Is that the arrangement you're looking for?" She actually thought about it. That alone told me everything. "I want you to stop pretending we're one big happy family," she said finally. "I want you to accept that your role here is limited. And I want you to stop making Michael feel guilty every time we don't include you." "I've never made Michael feel guilty," I said. "Haven't you?" she replied. "What about last month when you told him how lonely you were during Natalie's birthday party? Or Thanksgiving, when you mentioned how quiet your place was after we went to my sister's?" She turned to face me again. "You may not realize you're doing it, but you are." I stood there in the kitchen while Rachel listed my supposed offenses, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't sadness or anger. It was a strange, sudden clarity, like a light snapping on in a room I'd been groping through for years. "You're right," I said quietly. Rachel blinked, clearly caught off guard. She'd been bracing for resistance, not agreement. "I am." "Yes," I replied. "You're absolutely right." I took a breath before continuing. "I've been making assumptions about my place in this family. I assumed that because I love Michael and the children, that love was returned in the same way. I assumed my help was welcomed, not merely tolerated. I assumed I was wanted, not just useful." Rachel's eyes narrowed, her expression cautious now, as if she sensed something shifting beneath her feet. "But you know what?" I went on. "You've just given me the most honest gift I could have received this Christmas. You told me the truth. And now that I finally understand where I stand, I can make a few changes." "What kind of changes?" she asked. I smiled. Whatever she saw in that smile made her take a small step backward. "Well, for starters," I said, If my role in this family is strictly financial, then we should treat it like what it apparently is, a transaction. No more surprise gifts. No more last-minute loans. No more unspoken expectations about what family owes one another. Kathleen, that's not what Isn't it? I said calmly. You told me you accept my money because you have to, not because you want to. You said my presence is the cost of that help. So let's remove the cost. Her face had gone pale. From now on, if you need money, you can ask for it directly. No holidays. No obligations. No pretending we enjoy each other's company. Just business. You're being ridiculous, she said quickly. I never said. You said exactly that, I interrupted. You talked about pressure. About necessity. Well, now you won't have to accept anything from me at all. You can find another way to handle it. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Michael appeared in the doorway, Lucas right behind him. How are my favorite ladies doing? Michael asked, forcing a brightness into his voice. He could feel the tension, even if he didn't understand it. Just talking, Rachel said at once. About holiday traditions. And changes. I looked at my son, the man I'd raised, loved, and supported for 42 years, and wondered when he'd become so skilled at sidestepping uncomfortable truths. When he'd learned to accept Rachel's version of things without question. When he'd stopped wondering how I felt. Dad, Lucas said suddenly, Mom won't let us have Grandma's apple crisp. It's in the pantry, but she says we can't eat it. Michael frowned. Apple crisp. He turned to me. Mom, did you bring apple crisp? She did, Lucas said before I could answer. But Mom says it's not appropriate for Christmas dinner. I watched Michael's face as he tried to work it out. Confusion pulling against habit, curiosity against avoidance. Well, he said finally, maybe we can have it later. Like a midnight snack or something. It sounded diplomatic. It was also revealing. Rachel decided. Michael adjusted. Actually, I said, reaching for my purse, I think I should head home. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Michael insisted it was too early. The kids protested, wanting to show me more gifts. Even Rachel offered a polite suggestion about coffee and dessert. But I noticed what no one else did. The relief in her eyes. And that told me everything I needed to know. She'd achieved exactly what she wanted, a clear boundary on her terms about what our relationship would be from now on. No, really, I should go, I said, hugging Lucas and Natalie. Thank you for a lovely Christmas dinner. Michael walked me to the door, draping my coat over his arm and carrying the untouched dish of apple crisp like an afterthought. Mom, are you okay? He asked quietly. You seem different. I paused at the doorway, looking back at the warm, beautifully decorated house. A place that had just made it clear I no longer belonged. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said. Just thinking about some changes I might need to make in the new year. What kind of changes? Oh, nothing dramatic, I replied lightly. Just reassessing a few things. Priorities, you know. He nodded, concerned but not alarmed. To him, a 67-year-old woman talking about priorities probably sounded like reflection, not resolution. If you need anything, he said, you know you can call. Of course, I answered. Though we both knew those calls had become increasingly hollow. Brief conversations padded with politeness and ended quickly, as if my voice itself were an inconvenience. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through neighborhoods glowing with Christmas lights. Through uncovered windows I could see families gathered around tables and trees, laughter spilling into the cold night. I wondered how many of those scenes were as fragile as the one I just left. Back in my small apartment, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. I didn't make a to-do list. I made an accounting. Every loan to Michael and Rachel over the past 5 years. Every temporary mortgage payment. Every emergency repair. Every check written for the children's expenses. Every gift large enough to dent my own savings. The total startled me. Far more than I'd realized and far more than I could safely continue if I wanted security in my retirement. But the money wasn't the real problem. Money could be replaced. Budgets adjusted. At my age, I didn't need extravagance to be comfortable. What I needed was dignity, self-respect, the ability to look in the mirror and recognize the woman staring back. For years, I'd been buying tolerance and calling it love. Accepting crumbs of attention and calling it closeness. enabling Rachel's control and calling it keeping the peace. That ended today. My phone rang. Michael's name lit up the screen and my stomach tightened. I knew the pattern. Rachel would want reassurance, damage control, confirmation that my feelings weren't bruised badly enough to threaten the flow of money. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. And again. On the third call I answered. "Mom, thank God," Michael said, breathless. There's a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Rachel called the police." My blood went cold. "What happened?" "She says you threatened her. That you talked about cutting off contact with the family. She told them your behavior was erratic, and that she feels unsafe. The officers are here and they want to speak with you." The world tilted. After everything, the insults, the humiliation, the calculated cruelty, Rachel was playing the victim. And she was using the police to do it. 20 minutes later, I sat in my living room across from Officer Denise Harper, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with the steady gaze of someone who had seen every flavor of family dysfunction imaginable. "Mrs. Turner," she said, "your daughter-in-law claims you made threatening statements about severing contact with the family, and that your behavior today caused her concern. Can you tell me what happened?" I almost laughed. After years of manipulation, Rachel had finally pushed too far. Because one thing you learn by the time you're 67 with a spotless record is this. When you speak calmly and plainly, people tend to listen. "Officer Harper," I said, "Rachel told me today that my role in their family is purely financial. She explained that my presence is tolerated because I help with their expenses, not because they want me there. When I said I understood and would adjust my expectations, she apparently interpreted that as a threat." The officer began writing. "What kind of financial help are we talking about?" I handed her the list I just finished. "Over the past 5 years, approximately $43,000, I said. "Loans, gifts, mortgage payments, car repairs, children's expenses. None of it ever repaid. None of it ever requested." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's a significant amount." "I'm a mother," I said quietly. "I helped because I believed it was love." Officer Harper studied me for a long moment. "Mrs. Turner," she said finally, "I need to ask you something directly. Did you say anything that could be taken as a threat?" Officer Harper asked. "I told Rachel that if our relationship was only about money, then we should stop pretending otherwise," I explained. "No more family dinners where I'm barely welcome. No more acting like we enjoy each other's company. If they need financial help, they can ask directly, but I won't keep paying people who clearly resent me." "That doesn't sound like a threat." "It wouldn't be to a reasonable person," I added. "But Rachel isn't reasonable. She's been gradually cutting me off from my son and grandchildren while continuing to rely on my bank account. When I finally said I wouldn't keep enabling that, she panicked." Officer Harper closed her notebook. "Mrs. Turner, I don't see any threatening behavior here. This sounds like a family dispute about boundaries and finances. I do need to document the call, but that's all." After she left, I sat alone in my quiet apartment and felt something unexpected settle in. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't confused. I wasn't desperate to fix anything. I was angry, not wildly, not emotionally, but clearly. The kind of anger that comes when something finally snaps into focus. Rachel had made a serious mistake. By calling the police, she dragged the situation into the open. And once examined objectively, her behavior looked exactly like what it was. Manipulative, calculated, and impossible to justify. My phone buzzed. A message from Michael. "Mom, I'm sorry about the police thing. Rachel was upset and overreacted. Can we talk tomorrow and work this out?" I read it several times. Even now, he framed it as her being emotional, not intentional. As something we both needed to fix. As if I were equally responsible. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and turned to a question that had been bothering me all evening. Rachel Coleman, now Rachel Turner, had always been vague about her life before Michael. I'd brushed it off as privacy, nothing unusual. But sitting there, I realized how little I actually knew. Where did she go to college? What was her full maiden name? What jobs had she held before becoming a stay-at-home mother? After 8 years, I couldn't answer any of it. Michael met her at a Denver coffee shop in 2015. She'd been a manager there. That much I knew. But when I searched for records of coffee shops employing an Rachel Coleman around that time, I found nothing solid. Businesses had closed, changed names, or had no public employment history. What I did find were court records. 3 women named Rachel Coleman in the Denver area had been involved in civil cases between 2010 and 2015. 2 were clearly not her. The third stopped me cold. Rachel J. Coleman, age 28 in 2014, sued by a former employer for embezzlement. The case had been settled and sealed, but the original filing was still visible. She'd been accused of systematically stealing from client accounts over an 8-month period, using her position as office manager to hide it. The timing lined up perfectly. The case closed in early 2015. Michael met Rachel later that same year. A woman leaving behind a sealed financial case might need a fresh start. A new identity. Stability. Someone else's resources. I leaned back, the pieces falling into place. Her insistence on controlling all household finances. Her precise knowledge of our family's money. Her steady effort to distance me socially while keeping my financial support intact. This wasn't just tension between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. This was pattern behavior. Still, suspicion wasn't enough. I needed facts. The next morning, I called my bank and requested copies of every check I'd written to Michael or Rachel over the past 5 years. Then I contacted my financial advisor and asked him to review my account history, focusing on large transfers and emergency payments tied to my family. What I learned made my stomach tighten. The $43,000 I'd estimated was only the obvious money. There were gift cards meant for the grandchildren but handed to Rachel. Direct deposits during tight months. Payments to contractors for home repairs. School expenses. Medical bills. The real total was over $67,000. But one detail stood out. Several emergency requests came during periods when Michael's income should have been more than sufficient to cover their needs. Unless they were catastrophically mismanaging money, or unless someone was quietly diverting it. I thought of Rachel's designer handbags, her spa visits, her expensive yoga classes she proudly posted online. She never seemed short on money for herself. That afternoon, I did something I had never done before. I stopped assuming and started paying attention. I drove to Michael's neighborhood and parked across the street from their house. Not to spy exactly, at least not in the way that word usually implies, but to watch. To observe. I wanted to see whether this new understanding of Rachel would make things I previously overlooked suddenly obvious. It did. At 2:30 p.m., a large delivery truck pulled up. Not a standard package truck, but a furniture delivery from one of those upscale boutiques downtown. 2 men unloaded a dining table, several chairs, and a sideboard that looked like it belonged in a showroom. The kind of set that costs more than most people's vehicles. 30 minutes later, Rachel arrived. She stepped out of her car carrying multiple shopping bags, Nordstrom, Anthropologie, and at least 2 other high-end stores I recognized immediately. This was a Tuesday afternoon, barely a day after Christmas. And here she was, indulging in what could only be described as a significant shopping spree. I thought about her words from the day before. The pressure they were under, the expensive mortgage, Michael's demanding job. How they had to accept my financial help because things were so tight. Yet less than 24 hours later, thousands of dollars were being spent on furniture and clothing. My phone rang. Michael. I answered. Mom, I'm glad you picked up, he said. We really need to talk about yesterday. Rachel's upset, and I think there are some misunderstandings we should clear up. Michael, I said calmly, where are you right now? At work. Why? And Rachel? She took the day off. Running errands, maybe doing some after Christmas shopping. The kids are at friends' houses, so she's got time to herself. After Christmas shopping with what money? I thought. Michael, I said, I need to ask you something and I want you to answer honestly. How much money do you think I've given your family over the past 5 years? There was a pause. I don't know, he said finally. We've never added it up. You've been generous, sure, but $67,000. Silence. So long I thought the call had dropped. That can't be right, he said at last. I have bank statements, canceled checks, and transaction records, I replied. Loans, gifts, emergency payments, direct expenses. $67,000. Mom, Even if that's accurate, you've never made us feel obligated. Haven't I? I asked. Because according to Rachel, that money does come with strings. She told me yesterday that you both feel obligated to include me, because of my financial help. That you accept it because you have to, not because you want to. Another silence. She said a lot of things yesterday. She also asked you to call me today. I said. Not because she regretted how she treated me, but because she's afraid I might stop helping financially. That's not fair, Mom. You're making this sound calculated. Am I? I asked quietly. Let me ask you something else. When was the last time Rachel suggested including me in a family activity? Her idea, not yours. I could hear him searching his memory. Well, Christmas dinner was her idea. And how did that turn out? I asked. He didn't answer. That evening my phone rang again. But this time it wasn't Michael. This is Detective Laura Bennett with the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit, the woman said. Mrs. Turner, I understand you've recently been researching someone named Rachel Coleman. Can you tell me why? My heart skipped. How did you? Who is this really? Ma'am, your online searches flagged an active case. Rachel Coleman is a person of interest in an ongoing investigation. We'd like to speak with you about your connection to her. She's my daughter-in-law, I said slowly. She goes by Rachel Turner now. She married my son. When did the marriage take place? 2016. About 8 years ago. Mrs. Turner, Detective Bennett said, would you be willing to come to the station tomorrow morning? There are things you need to know about Rachel Coleman, and things we need to understand about her relationship with you. I didn't sleep that night. Every conversation, every slight, every financial emergency replayed in my mind, but now through a different lens. At exactly 9 a.m., I sat in Detective Bennett's office, staring at a file folder on her desk. Rachel's photo was clipped to the front, and I already knew my life and Michael's was about to change. Mrs. Turner, Detective Bennett said, Rachel Coleman has been using multiple identities for at least 10 years. The embezzlement case you found online was only the beginning. She's been married twice before under different names, and in both cases she systematically drained her husband's finances before disappearing. I felt sick. What about my son? I asked. What about the children? The children appear to be legitimately his, she replied. But Rachel Coleman, now Rachel Turner, has been running a long-term con on your family. She's been using your financial support to fund a lifestyle that includes a secret apartment, a second car registered under a different name, and preparations for another disappearance. Another disappearance? Detective Bennett opened the file and showed me surveillance photos. Rachel entering a bank I didn't recognize. Rachel meeting with a man I'd never seen before. Rachel loading boxes into a storage unit. We believe she's been planning to leave your son for several months, Bennett said. The pattern is always the same. She embeds herself with a financially stable family, extracts as much money as possible, and then vanishes with whatever assets she can liquidate. But the children in her previous marriages, I said. She left them behind? They weren't biologically hers, Bennett explained, but she'd been their stepmother for years. She has no problem abandoning children when it suits her purposes. I stared at the photos thinking about Lucas and Natalie, about how devastated they would be if Rachel suddenly vanished. Then another thought surfaced. If you know all this, I asked, why haven't you arrested her? We've been building a case, Bennett said, but we needed evidence of active fraud. Your research, combined with the financial information you can provide, gives us what we need to move forward. What do you want me to do? She leaned forward. Mrs. Turner, we want you to help us catch her in the act. The plan was simple. I would approach Rachel with an offer she couldn't refuse, a substantial early inheritance I wanted to give the family for tax purposes. The amount would be large enough to trigger her greed, but structured in a way that forced her to reveal hidden accounts and financial preparations. It took 3 days to prepare. During that time I had to act normally, taking Michael's calls and pretending nothing had changed. The hardest part was not warning him. Detective Bennett insisted Michael couldn't know. If he did, the operation would fail. On Friday morning I called Rachel. Rachel, I said, I'd like to talk to you about something important. Could we meet for coffee this afternoon? She sounded surprised, but she agreed. We met at a downtown coffee shop where Detective Bennett and her team could monitor the conversation. I've been thinking about our conversation on Christmas, I said. You were right about several things. I've been too involved, and I haven't respected your boundaries. She studied me, then nodded. I appreciate you saying that, Kathleen. I want to make amends, I continued, sliding a folder across the table. I want to do something that benefits your family's future without requiring my ongoing involvement. Inside the folder was the proposal prepared by the detective team. I'm prepared to give Michael and the children a substantial gift, $200,000, but I want to do it in a way that minimizes tax implications. Her eyes lit up, though she tried to hide it. That's very generous, she said. There are some complications with transferring that much money, especially since some funds would need to go into accounts that aren't jointly held. I'll need information on all your family's accounts, I said, including any personal accounts used for managing household expenses. This was the moment. If Rachel were legitimate, she would suggest involving Michael. I can provide that, she said quickly. Michael's so busy with work, and I handle all our financial planning anyway. It'll be easier if we work directly together. Over the next 20 minutes, she gave me details on their joint accounts, and 3 additional accounts I'd never heard of. She also mentioned investment accounts and a business account for a consulting company I didn't know existed. What she didn't know was that the entire conversation was being recorded, and Detective Bennett was watching from across the cafe. One more thing, I said. The transfer needs to happen quickly to meet the tax deadline. Can you make sure the accounts are ready? Absolutely, she replied. I really think we got off on the wrong foot at Christmas. This feels like a fresh start for our family. As I walked to my car, Detective Bennett called me. Mrs. Turner, we have everything we need. 3 of the accounts are under false names, and 1 has been receiving regular transfers from your son's joint account. We'll make arrests tomorrow morning. The next morning, Michael called. Mom, he said, his voice shaking. Rachel's been arrested. They say she's wanted for fraud in 3 states. They say she's not even who we thought she was. That afternoon, I sat in my quiet apartment with a cup of tea and my apple crisp, finally served at the right temperature. I took time to reflect on how completely my life had shifted in just 1 week. Rachel was now in custody, facing charges that would likely keep her far from any family for a long time. Michael was heartbroken, but he was starting to grasp how deeply he had been manipulated. The children were unsettled but safe, gradually learning that their grandmother had helped protect them from something they were far too young to fully understand. Most of all, I had reclaimed my dignity. I was no longer a victim. I had become someone who refused to tolerate mistreatment. At 67 years old, I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. And sometimes the best form of revenge is simply refusing to ever be anyone's victim again. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.